Hey everyone, it's Danique. I'm not the person you were probably expecting. Meg is actually so popular that she had to be on another podcast. Um, so you're joining me. You're a guest host for Ladies Take Over Liberty, and I am Danique, the president and founder of Leashes, Valor. And I actually have somebody special joining us tonight, last minute, and that is Madison Campbell. Madison Campbell and I have known each other for a few years now, and she is someone who's really, really dear to my heart because we connected over something very personal we both went through. And I also follow her on LinkedIn because I love her leadership style. And she's the founder of a health company, which is, I guess, what you now call sex tech. But I'm going to let her share all of the details on what Leda Health actually does. But please welcome Madison Campbell to join me tonight at Ladies Take Over Liberty.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here, and I love this takeover. This is great.
So welcome to the show, and thank you for literally 11th hour joining us. I texted Madison last night asking if she would come on the show, and originally it was going to be Meg and I, but as we know, Meg had other plans, and here we are. So Madison, if you don't mind, could you tell us maybe a little bit on what led all the way up to the moment you and I met, maybe?
Yeah. So backtracking a little bit. So I myself am a sexual assault survivor, and that will kind of be, I think, a big part of the topic of our show. I was sexually assaulted when I was in college. It was somebody that I knew. I thought I trusted him. Turns out I couldn't have trusted him. And unfortunately, that instant happened, and I did not report. So I did not report. I didn't tell my family at the time. I didn't tell anybody about what had happened to me. And it took me a multitude of years to really come to terms with what had happened and start telling people and getting a lot of support, from my family and from my friends. And it was just a really tough time. And so, moving forward, I was kind of looking at, okay, well, why didn't I report? Why, didn't I not want to talk about this? What made me so ashamed? Why didn't I want to get medical care or mental health care or anything? And that brought me to trying to create a company to address that need. So, in civilian life, 77% of folks do not report their sexual assault nationwide. On college campuses, it's 90 to 95%. And in the military, it's 75% of folks that don't report. And so that's a large number, right? It's definitely the majority of folks are going through this and not talking about it. And I think those individuals deserve, a different solution to really help them, capture evidence, be able to report what happened to them, get medical care, get mental health care, get anything that they need. Because in the moment, it can be very scary to access these resources, and, closing that gap and creating adjacent resources to those that already exist out there are super important. And so early on in the company, we were conducting stakeholder interviews, and I was on LinkedIn and I found you, and I am so glad I found you. And I remember our first call, which you were just such a sharpshooter, telling me, like exactly how you felt, exactly what you thought. And I loved it. And since then, not only do I consider you a good friend and advisor, but through kind of the hardest times that we've gone through, and we've gone through some hard times in trying to bring this, to market, you've been there 100% of the time. And so I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad that we can still even have this conversation because the company is still standing 2 years later, which is, for any company, it's difficult, but, specifically for something like this, it's very difficult to put a foothold.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so now that you finally put the cat out of the bag, it's a lot easier for me to talk about this, but I didn't want to take away from your narrative. So yeah, so obviously Madison and I know each other and connected over mutual experiences, meaning for those that have not seen me on Liberty Risk, I am also a survivor of sexual assault. Mine is called MST, military sexual trauma. So when I met Madison and she was talking about this product, it was a huge aha moment for me. I'm like, where the fuck was this when I was in? So my assaults started happening from 2002 to 2005 at the 1st Command. And I was a military police officer, master at arms. So the people assaulting me are people in my immediate chain of command, meaning all the way up to the equivalent of a chief of police. That kind of limits the scope of where I'm going to be able to go for reporting and evidence and any of those things. And let's be real about how much HIPAA we really have in the military. Like your medical history and medical issues are not that private because you need to be excused from work to seek medical attention unless you are basically dying, and then they will have to call somebody for you. So hearing about that product again was like so profound, because I'm like, that would have been life-changing for someone like me who I wanted to report. I didn't know where to go. I felt boxed in. So I just envisioned this product being that missing key to between the policy level of Gillibrand, for example, wanting to take it away completely from the chain of command, which, you know, kind of that makes sense that you want to take it away from the aspect of if it's the chain of command doing it. But we also have to respect that this is the Department of Defense and these are military warfighters. So, you know, we still have to maintain that mission still comes first, that is the reality.
Yeah.
However, the mobility of your kit, meaning it can be available literally at the front of the front of the front on any ship, below seas, wherever we're going, it is mobile enough and tactical enough that it can go there. So it is not impeding mission. Exactly. That's the size of it.
Yeah. And we're actually making it smaller. And I realize we keep talking about this, but we haven't even said what it was.
All right. Let's put the horse back in front of the cart. Why don't you lead us into what the hell I'm talking about?
Yeah. So what we've done is created the first ever at-home sexual assault evidence collection kit. This is one of our prototypes. And inside the kit, it can be completed within 15 minutes. So you're collecting the most probative samples from your body. And as a lot of people may not know, DNA degrades off of your body incredibly quickly. If you shower, you take a bath, if you brush your teeth, which, by the way, is the first thing that you want to do after a sexual assault. It's just like clean yourself. And so, yeah, exactly. So, you know, one of the things that folks want to do is kind of really kind of get over with it. And so what we've done is created this, you know, very privatized version where you can do this in the comfort of your own home, in the comfort of a barrack, right? If you're on a deployment, you know, anything like that, it can be done very quickly. It's very user-centric. We work with the Academy of Forensic Nursing to actually create all of the diagrams and all of the instructions based off of forensic nursing and what they would do. And what we're really encouraging people is take that first step. And if you start taking that first step, then more people are going to be inclined to seek further medical, further mental health care, you know, further evidence collection. But that first step is the most difficult. And if we can make that a little bit better and a little bit easier, then we believe that, you know, reporting over time will go up and incidents over time will go down.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important to remember that the reality is you can't prevent rape from happening. Like, there's always going to be that one douchebag somewhere that just fucking does that shit. And it happens to men and women. So let's also be clear that this is not like a gender debate on any kind, and horrible things can be done by either party to the other party. But shame is the biggest thing that for me comes to mind when it comes to reporting and also asking for medical attention to even have something like that done. And from what I understand, the statistics on people qualified to do a rape kit and the amount of rape kits actually processed in the civilian world, like imaginary city of fucking something, 60 or 70% of those are just sitting somewhere, degrading, not being processed.
Yeah, so 200,000 kids currently sit on the backlog, and it takes an average of 2 years to get your kit tested. Some states are better than other states. I don't know the exact numbers of, like, you know, I've been doing a lot of research, and it looks like there's usually a sexual assault response coordinator on each base. But, you know, it's hard for me as a civilian to understand, like, Are they there all the time? Is it 24 hours, 7 days a week? What about on deployments? Like, what does access really mean? That's what I want to know.
I mean, actually, that's a really good question. And I mean, thinking on some of the bases I was at, there was not 24-hour medical care, for example. We were like, you had to commute to get to a naval hospital. So yeah, where legitimately would a kit like that be housed, or vice versa? Where do people currently go, and how limited is our access to care at the moment? And I mean, I've been out for a hot minute, so I'm not even the most up to date on how things are, but judging by the data, since we're coming on the 1-year anniversary of the Vanessa Guillen, started to show up on everybody's social media feed, and we're all like, oh wait, hold the phone, we've seen this shit before, no more. So it's really escalated this year, but judging by the numbers, nothing's changed. So the reality is, these kits we're talking about that haven't even been processed currently, these rape kits and these lack of people qualified, that's only for the ones willing and able to go out and actually report, which is a smaller of the numbers. Most of the people don't even make it to that step. They don't know where to go. There's way too much shame involved, or they know the person, and there's so many other extenuating circumstances that prevent them from actually seeking help, which many of those could be completely cut out of the equation with basically what I call the at-home DNA kit for, the 23andMe that everybody's doing because you want to put your DNA database somewhere. But your kit's the same version. It's really something you can do in the privacy of your home. You don't have to find somebody who's qualified to do it. And then it may get processed somewhere properly, maybe. And especially because there's no HIPAA in the military. I had people escalating me to medical. Like, I wasn't even going to be able to ask for that at medical. You have no privacy.
Yeah, I mean,
access something like that.
Like, walk me through this too. Like, if you would have gone to medical, like, would it would you have had any even like walls between you and someone else? Like, would you have been in like a room by yourself? Or, I mean, I've heard of many folks, even in hospital ER rooms, where they're getting these kits done with like literally, like the little cloth right between it. And, I heard a story, it was like about a month ago now, of a survivor telling me the story. And she said there was somebody with a gunshot wound, who came in next to her, who of course is like screaming and yelling and like, experiencing a lot of trauma, but she's also experiencing trauma. And how do you like feel when it's like gunshot wound and
It's, yeah. And that brings the full circle to, the PTSD and the trauma that comes afterward, because these are, except for initial visible injuries, a lot of the trauma that happens with this is very, very internal on the psyche. So just the aspect of being, and I really hate douchey words like empowered, but fuck yeah, let's use it here. Being empowered to take the first step to actually collect that data and be like, you know what, even if I just sit on this for a couple hours, at least I'm going to collect it. Then I can fucking shower and then I can think about this clearly. Yeah. But to have that power of decision making, which is the first time you're allowed to make a decision again, because other decisions were taken away from you.
Yeah.
That's a huge step. And I mean, the cost of a kit like that and the size of a kit like that is so marginal compared to, if you think about the amount of money you invest in each person in the military. And I mean, I'm not taking away from victims that are non-military members, but I'm specifically talking about the military needs to adopt this product for sure. Is, God, completely lost my train of thought. That's so funny.
But no, like, I mean, we're, equipping these folks with very, very expensive gear, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of gear. Why can't we spend $5, to give each person the ability to have a cardboard box that could potentially really help them? Like, I want to talk about a little, I've been having conversations around the recruiting process and induction and like, basic training and things like that, where there's a lot of stuff being thrown at you. And I talked to a member today who was saying, yeah, we got told about resources, for 45 minutes in one of our induction training, and that was it. And she was like, and I honestly don't remember any of that, because you were getting filled with tons of stuff. Like, they're telling you this, they're telling you that, they're telling you this. How are you supposed to remember, that 45-minute class that you did, maybe even less, 5 years later when one of these incidents happen?
Yeah. So if they even talk about it or do any kind of in-doc on it, it's very awkward. Like, everybody kind of makes awkward jokes about it. If you even take notes, like, where are you going to find those later? So when it comes to like legit training, I mean, I hope somebody in the audience can correct me, but I don't think it exists yet, from what I understand.
I mean, it reminds me of colleges, which, on my college campus, when I first went to college, they did like if you have a problem, there's a blue light on campus, and you click the blue light and maybe somebody will help you out. But like, that's it. That was all that was ever taught to you. And you're like, okay, like, am I sexually assaulted? I hit this blue light and something magical happens and it's fixed? Of course not, right?
I remember those. Yeah, they're all over campus. I actually didn't get to read the whole comment, but Matthew made a comment about a problem in the military and the bias in the positions, and that he's right on that. So SARC, SAPR, SAPRA, whatever they are called, the sexual assault persons, those are usual collateral duties, meaning that is an additional duty to whatever career you have in the military. And that's usually an attaboy or something to fluff your resume. I don't know how that affects if you have good numbers or bad numbers, if that means you're going to lose your position, or if you're just going to sweep everything under the rug because you want to maintain that job. Meaning, it is not somebody who is really in that position because they're licensed, trained, interested in really doing that. Jeannie writes, with safe exams, there's a guaranteed chain of custody. Do these at-home kits provide the same legally recognized chain of custody? That's a great question, Jeannie. Thank you.
That's a great question. Do you mind if I take that?
Please do. I don't know the answer.
Okay, great. So, so I'm going to answer this in more of civilian speak, but I've begun doing research on court-martialing and the rules of evidence. And as we were talking before the show started, there is not a lot of rules of evidence. What were you talking about earlier on before this started?
For us, it's Captain's Mast. It's Article 15, meaning basically the commanding officer of the base has like a different legal authority when it doesn't go to a court-martial level.
Yeah. So, and that kind of reminds me of like civil versus criminal court in a way, where like the civil standard of evidence is lower than the criminal standard of evidence. So, to talk about the criminal court, which I believe is as similar to, a court martial in military, there's something called the rules of evidence. That evidence requires it to be both relevant and reliable. And so, every new piece of evidence is always scrutinized because it's never been done before. So when text messages first started getting used, courts were like, what is this, right? When self-recorded videos started getting used, they're like, how do we utilize this? And now, for instance, let's take the George Floyd incident, right? That is all self-recorded videos, and that is being used, to, potentially create a verdict. And so the notion of self-collected evidence is not new. It's just new in this regard because we have not allowed sexual assault survivors the autonomy to do this. So with chain of custody, at least in the civilian sense, chain of custody actually does not apply until an individual goes to a ranking authority. So brings their kid to a nurse, a government mandated nurse, or a police officer. That chain of custody doesn't apply. And the way that you can think about it like this in civilian sense is, say you're at home and somebody throws a brick into your window, and like in your window, right? And you grab the brick, right? You've self-collected this brick and you bring it to a police officer and you're like, I think somebody is like, trying to attack my house. There's a brick. that self-collected evidence was the brick that you then brought to the police, that you then turned over and said, hey, I would like to file a report. Somebody threw this. Now, are they going to ask you, oh, where did that brick come from? Did you throw that brick by yourself? Like, did you take the brick to McDonald's? Like, who might have touched the brick, right? Like all these things. No, because, the burden in terms of chain of custody and evidence then goes on to the police officer, to the government official. And so this notion of chain of command, chain of evidence, at least in civilian sense, really only applies when the survivor or, the individual in question then brings the evidence forward. And so the way we imagine this happening is an individual would collect this evidence, just like they would have collected a bed sheet or their own underwear or the clothes that they were wearing, and then bring it to maybe at someone at SAPR, their commanding officer, if they feel comfortable, or anyone who could then kind of take command of that, starting the chain of custody there. But it really is no different than an individual such as yourself collecting your own clothes that you were wearing when you were assaulted, putting it in a paper bag, and then bringing it forward. Good question. Yeah, sorry, that was a lot. And I also, let me talk about technology in a way. So chain of custody has always been done pen and paper, right? It's always somebody signing off, sending this to somebody else. And so what we've actually done is created a novel technology. And so what we're doing is utilizing phones with unique identifiers to scan every barcode. Those barcodes then have immutable timestamps that can't be changed or altered. So this is actually a way to bring both the government on the civilian side and on the military side up to the 21st century by creating a chain of custody that is actually technology focused versus pen and paper. Yeah. Sorry.
Say it ain't so. I don't have to mail a check-in anymore.
I know. Insane, right? So I saw a question about the backlog, and I think that's a very important question. I don't know enough about non-civilian to basically talk about if there is a backlog in the military. I assume with everything, it takes very slow. But with us, we actually use a third-party laboratory that has the ability to do rush testing in 48 hours. So actually getting a result back in 48 hours. Average time will be 2 to 4 weeks, but, comparatively, that's really nothing. And so, that's kind of how we're not adding to the backlog, is we're creating a completely privatized version of this that does not operate under the guise of hoping that crime labs have enough time to manage these rape kits, as well as manage all the other things that come in front of their plate, whether that be drugs, murders, trace evidence, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you for answering that question about the basically the backlog, because we earlier addressed how on the civilian side, at least, there's a lot of rumors out there that shit's backlogged a lot. I actually don't even know how the military, or if they do process rape kits internally. I literally don't know anything about that. I didn't see that last question that just came on the screen, but Jeannie wrote, since military providers have been trained in safe exams, they have become more attuned to the necessity of private rooms, readily available support systems, and do not rush you through exams. First of all, fair enough. Second of all, I guess how many of those safe providers are there? And again, that is only if somebody is actually, I guess, has the lady balls to walk on in there and be like, hey, I need a rape kit done. Those are probably really, really hard words to utter in public. Let's be real.
I think the biggest thing here is we're not trying to replace what is currently done, because those individuals that do have the balls to go and move forward, they will move forward, but the data does not lie. And when you see, the 2019, and hopefully a 2020 report will come out soon, But, when you see a 2019 DoD report that comes out with 75% of those folks not reporting, that's a huge gap. And as much as we can optimize for that 15 to 20% of folks that do come forward, and I appreciate those folks that do have the balls, there's folks, by the way, Danique, you're like one of the most badass women I've ever met who, you could put one of your dogs out and kill somebody. Like you
haven't met our dogs yet.
Yeah. I'm I remember being so intimidated when I met you. The fact that someone like you couldn't even come forward, what does that say about anyone that isn't like you? You know what I mean? Or male survivors, right? Male survivors. What about the stigma of male survivors that are so ashamed of what happened to them? They can't even utter the words rape or sexual assault.
Yeah. And I mean, full disclosure, I have throughout the years, our team actually, at many organizations, I've had several men get service dogs as MST survivors. So it is, first of all, extremely common. I can't even fathom the shame they deal with. So, to circle back on Jeannie's question or comment about the safe exams or safe providers, this actually isn't to take away or say that, the industry hasn't changed a lot and really gotten a lot better about, how victims or survivors are treated, how the process goes, and all the resources that exist now. That I got out in 2007, like a long time ago. A lot has changed since then for the positive. However, again, we mentioned that margin of people reporting. This is to maybe increase the margin of people basically coming forward so that the ones that already have the balls, lady balls, to go to the nurse and say, I need a rape kit. Now we have professionals doing that. But then we still have probably 75% or more that are not ready to walk on in there and say those words. However, if they had access to that kit, maybe another 15 to 20% would be able to process and actually report that way. Maybe we would start catching fucking serial offenders, because let's be real, we all know there's some sick data, especially in the military, on when they just go from one command to the next and they keep doing it. Because I usually only see the victims get out of the military, not the perpetrators. So obviously they're doing something somewhere. But yeah.
And I'm going to drop something in here as well, which is this report that came out in Evidence Magazine, which is called Evidence Management of Self-Collected Items, a Targeted Gap Analysis. And what it actually shows is that an increase in at-home kits or an increase in self-collected evidence and giving those resources, not only is it trauma-centric for patient care, but it enables survivors to move forward and actually get further medical care. And so what you're basically saying is, let's help you take that first step. Because if you take that first step, what are the likelihoods if you had one of these, you took the first step, and inside it says, please go see your SAPR officer. They're here to help you. Here are all the resources. This is why it can be super private, super great. We're here to walk you through every step of the way. But maybe you just needed that first step of seeing that in your hand after you've done something. And so we're not seeing, at least, anecdotally, a decrease in the amount of medical care or further care sought, actually an increase in that, because of individuals taking that first step that then allows them to take all the subsequent steps after.
So Jeannie writes, the margin is certainly increasing, but you're right that there's a lot who aren't ready. I would be interested to know how military members' privacy would be protected in regards to restricted and unrestricted reporting with these kits. I think the biggest thing we need to highlight here is that Danique bringing up these kits on this podcast and yelling at Madison for years that the military needs this is purely based on my opinion, and not actually it's not like the military actually knows these really exist yet, to the point where they're like, oh yeah, and we're totally going to do this. Meaning this is all open to negotiation. So basically, tell your C daddy, tell your supply guy, or whoever can sign MOUs and stuff that this is available. But also, government contracts work, people, like, you can also say, hey, we feel like this needs to be written in there, and this is how you guarantee a service member's restricted versus non-restricted. Like, the government still has control over this. I'm just saying, like, get these people a fucking kid on the front line so we can get some reporting going, so these numbers stop lying, because people are fucking dying. Wow, that rhymed a lot. Jesus Christ.
That was really good. No, wow. I think I think what is like what we could potentially do too is create a task force of folks like Jeannie as well, who come together from different departments, say their experience, what they're fearful of, what they're currently doing. And this task force could be the ones that, gradually introduce pilots, and that's what I think is going to really take. It's going to take members from the military police side, from the sapper side, commanders, every single person coming to the table, like we did around Vanessa, which is people finally coming to the table and saying change is change needs to happen. And the only way change happens is if we come to the table and say, this is a problem. This is one solution, but let's talk about solutions. And by the way, if we try the solution and we find out it doesn't work, then we just go back to the table and we try new solutions. But, one of the things that often frustrates me is this lack of solutions, right? We keep doing the same thing over and over again without saying, let's throw a $4 cardboard box in someone's hand and just see if it changes anything,
The government's policy, why change anything? We've always done it this way. Pamela writes, being able to have your own personal kit would help give the person control back too, when those words are too hard to say to anyone, much less in an ER. Fucking valid, girl. Fucking valid right there. Yeah, so holy shit. Man, these comments are coming in like fire right now. For example, Jeannie writes, if that home kits are reported to local authorities, do they lose their restricted reporting rights? I don't know. Write it in the contract. Like, let's dream this shit up and make it happen. I'm just saying, give everybody this little swabby kit to take with them.
I think those are all the things we'll find out, right? If we
these are dope questions, because this is good stuff to write in, Madison. If you were going after a contract, BT dubs, anybody who knows about government contracts, look them up. Let's get some shopping going. Same with hospitals or wherever else you work. Like, this could be at schools and things. This could be everywhere.
But I think these are great questions, and I think it's very difficult for a civilian to know the answers. But what it will take is coming from a civilian perspective and then working with these members that understand how to make this happen, and also not saying like oh, tomorrow we're going to drop these off and we'll figure it out along the way. It's hey, like tomorrow, let's have a conversation. Let's get this going and we'll figure out how to make it work. And those are important questions, which, by the way, have never been asked because no one has ever done this before, which is, the interesting thing. And I think so great is that we potentially get to create, the environment that we want to see, create the change that we want to see. And I would love to have some of these SAPER officers, come to the table and even write, the restrictions and write the rules on how these could be used. Like, bringing them to the table to create the lobbying and legislation power that they want would be so amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not trying to take their voice away on even how the military, for example, would run this kit. Like, you're just saying, this is what I fucking created because I'm a survivor, and obviously shit wasn't being done right. But we can obviously adapt the instruction booklet and all the other things to make it work for mission readiness, because we all know, like, that's the top priority for them.
And I want to talk about a new study that was also recently done, which was in late 2020. So I think it was November last year, so not too far long ago. A group of criminal justice experts reviewed 2,000 military rape cases that found that many had been sent to court-martial without enough evidence to convict, and that those cases undermine the military justice system's ability to properly prosecute sexual assaults. And critically, the experts noted that when a survivor documents injuries, undergoes a forensic examination, and DNA is collected and tested, sexual assault prosecutions are much more likely to have adequate evidence. And so I believe that, evidence is this golden standard that is going to create more prosecution. And, one of the things that will be difficult in increasing the amount of evidence collected is if, we're not meeting that 75% of folks that can't get traditional forms of evidence collected. And so I hate to say it's a better than nothing approach, but it's something. And now, is it perfect? No, of course, in the perfect world, everybody feels empowered to go to these officers to get this done. But, in the world where even saying the word rape or going to an ER and saying, I was sexually assaulted might be difficult, we need to talk about different options and be innovative in thoughts.
Yeah. And I mean, if we were in an ideal world, we wouldn't need a military in the first place. So since we already need them, we're not that ideal. So having these kits, full circle.
And in a world too, we wouldn't need any evidence because we would believe survivors based off of their word and what they say, right? But oh my God, when is it going to be the world where we believe women? That'll be a crazy world.
Girlfriend, unicorns, man. That's some unicorn shit right there. But since nobody's blowing up our shit with a whole bunch of questions, I guess I'm going to ask one because I always hear it on any of the negative troll sites. And that is the adage of, what about the false reporting? Or what is the, the tamper fraud, like, how can this kid prevent that or be abused?
Yeah. And so, I think this notion of consent is a very difficult notion because, not to bring it completely out of a crazy world, but like the BDSM community, right? In the BDSM community, you could see somebody who literally has like hot wax stripped down their backs and 3rd-degree burns and slaps, and all this stuff. And that was consensual, right? Because it was a consensual relationship. So this notion of injuries equaling non-consensual is kind of been like debunked. And so this notion of consent needing to kind of have like injuries associated, as we both know, you could see a sexual assault survivor walk down the street and they would look exactly like someone who wasn't. And so, the notion of consent is highly psychological. And so no one can be in the business of consent, whether or not this was consensual. And when it comes down to false allegations, it's usually a question on consent. And that always will remain at the behest of a judge, a jury, and a judge to determine, was this a consensual act or not? What we're doing is just providing a piece to the puzzle. And that piece to the puzzle proves, did penetration occur? And then another piece of the puzzle that we can eventually do is drugs, right? Were they drugged? Did they have rohypnol, GHB, ketamine, some sort of drug? Because if you show that there was a date rape drug, that often proves this notion of force. And so in the puzzle piece that is, doing a prosecution of sexual assault, you're looking for those puzzle pieces, the puzzle piece of penetration, the puzzle piece of force, and the puzzle piece of consent, the consent one being the stickiest, the hardest one to prove. And so, historically speaking, statistically speaking, false allegations are only ever 2 to 5% of all cases ever. And so it does not happen. And usually when it happens, it's not because there's so much evidence. Like, people aren't saying, oh, I took this person's underwear, they sexually assaulted me, all this kind of stuff. It's usually a he said, she said, with no evidence, just one person's word against another. And so, not only if somebody used this to falsify evidence against someone else, would it be a crime, a very, very bad crime. Falsifying evidence is perjury. But also, when you look at false allegations, they usually are happening between two people's word. And so if you were able to, for instance, have a male who said, oh, I did not, have sex with that person, and then, they don't have a kit to prove, if kits are readily available and it's as simple as 1, 2, 3 to collect that, that is going to be very detrimental to basically say, oh, like, what is your proof? If these kits are readily available, the standard is a little bit higher, ensuring that there aren't false allegations as well.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the military can definitely adapt a lot of this to kind of fit their own rules. Any major like pushback on the civilian side you can talk about? How's this been embraced by the local PD?
So we get varied. So during COVID-19, sexual assault survivors were considered non-essential patients in a lot of places. And so believe it or not, these at-home kits were utilized in civilian court, in criminal court in California with no chain of custody or admissibility problems, which is really great.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. I mean, it's horrible, but that it was actually implemented and moved forward is a really, really huge step.
And the fact in the matter is it took stakeholders coming to the table. So they created something called the Monterey Protocol, and it was police officers, district attorneys, and nurses all working together, which is what I believe we need to do. Is we need to bring every stakeholder together to work on implementing this. It's not going to be something that just automatically comes. It's something that we work towards together. And so with that being said, if you bring the right folks to the table, I believe that there won't be, a huge burden of evidence, in terms of can we get this through? But what it will take is bringing those stakeholders together and setting court precedent.
Absolutely. And I mean, we spend so much money on all of our war fighters. It's really a shame if we're losing some really, really solid personnel just because we can't at least treat people with the human dignity that they deserve after going through something like that. And I think that's, at least when I talk to most other military survivors, is one of the biggest things is really the assault, the rape. Those are much more survivable than the actual betrayal of those that you reach out to or need for support. So this, I hope everybody tags, the sergeant majors and whatever the leadership of your branches and everybody else, so that at a minimum, this dialogue keeps going for everyone. And, if there's just a few people that could have their life changed or their career changed by this, that'd be a huge step. But actually, for a few minutes, I want to pivot a little bit about all the other things that is Madison, because legit, the reality is, so both of our careers in a way changed from, traumatic events. I eventually left the military and had to fuck my way to where I am now. And for you, like, this happened at college, which in itself is an institution. Yeah. So that also changed your trajectory because you didn't quite finish and stay there in hunky-dory, did you? Can you elaborate a little bit on kind of where you stumbled to for a minute?
Yeah, so I was a junior in college when I was sexually assaulted, and I actually dropped out of college in my last semester. So I had 3 months left to go, but I was in a very bad mental health space. It was just bad. I couldn't get away from my abuser. I, constantly kind of had to be reminded of what happened to me over and over every day. And I decided it wasn't worth it. And so, believe it or not, I'm 25 now. I did disappoint my parents a little bit by, having 3 months left to go. But, I think they're very proud of me now of what I've turned that into. But, it is one of those things where in that moment, I totally fumbled around. I was trying to figure out where I was going in life, what made me passionate, what made me want to wake up every day and do. And I'm glad I ended up here. But it was a journey. And I think people just don't realize that you kind of go into this dark hole afterwards where, I remember just sleeping for hours and hours on end, watching TV. I was not myself. I wasn't talking to friends. I wasn't doing anything. But I kind of needed that reset to really figure out, what did I want to do with the rest of my life? And I do think in the future, I will go back, hopefully, maybe to law school, because I would love to represent some of these survivors who have no representation. But in the moment, you know, I think the biggest thing for me was taking care of myself and getting back to a space where I could actually wake up every day and be super proud of the thing that I was doing.
I mean, I hope your parents and I hope you are super proud of, you know, not only what you've created, but, you know, where you came from. And I mean, walking away at the 11th hour to save your mental health and probably save your life is very courageous. I can definitely see some similarity on even people like abandoning their career to save themselves. It's really, really hard to do that, especially when you feel like you're disappointing people too. You know, there's an identity crisis that goes with that. But I mean, out of tragedy also came innovation, because look at the product you created and the impact and the ripple effect that that's already having. But also people, I mean, for those that can't see Madison, who aren't watching live with us, she literally, like, I call her a little Polly Pocket. She's, you know, not to take away from the mighty person you are, but she's just this adorable little packet. So this 25-year-old survived all this bullshit, and then during the Rona, built this health company that is, you know, able to take government contracts and, you know, change lives at 25, by the way. I mean, that's phenomenal. And
what were you doing at 25? Like, what are most people doing at 25? I've been told, like, nothing, you know?
For other civilians, yeah, really. That's why I'm, like, repeatedly saying this, because usually the military people are like, oh yeah, you know, at 18 I was already doing this. But like, looking at your journey, should be really, really proud of what you've built, because that's also really innovative. And you're also a female founder in the health space, the sex tech space, basically. It's a little bit of everything, which is, you're a little bit of a unicorn in all of those. And that's hard to lead a team there. And nowadays remotely too, like shit.
I love what Jeannie's saying. I truly believe this can change things for the better and hope the DoD can pick it up sooner than later. Well, Jeannie, we'll have to connect and we will make that happen.
Yeah,
we will make that happen.
Let's make some peer pressure happen.
Yeah, some peer pressure happen. And I think, and by the way, my mom texted me to let me know she was proud of me, so she must be in the audience, but I love your mom. My mom has always been my biggest supporter. I come from a very strong line of very impressive, strong women.
Well, nice job, Mom. You made a good one here. And man, you're going to rock and roll this universe. Holy shit, girl. Thank you. But, you know, I also want everybody to know that I really follow Madison, because there's been times I needed her. And, you know, I've watched her fight through some serious shit to get this company going. And there's, you know, just from the aspect of not every community or county or whatever has been very receptive to having this competing with their local processes. We'll just leave it at that. So for somebody of your age and caliber to also fight through that over the last couple of years, like, that was ugly.
It was ugly. I've gotten harassed more than times that I want to admit, online, on Twitter, on social media. I've seen, by the way, you get harassed as well on social media, like none other. And it is crazy that so many people feel entitled to saying these horrible opinions, specifically around rape survivors, like, and calling them names and devaluing them in victim blaming. And I think that that's been, like, the hardest part, is this realization that, like, you can try to put yourself out there, do these things, but at the end of the day, you know, you get, you know, this random troll on internet, you know, who just for some reason has woken up and decided, I hate blonde women today, and has, you know, decided to take it out on you and me, you know. I don't know. Maybe we'd be more liked if we were redheads. I don't know.
Oh, I doubt it. I think we'd rub people the wrong way either way, and I think that's good that way.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I mean, you know, I think for, you know, I know this show has actually a lot of people watching that are survivors, that are out as survivors, and some that have not ever reported or even spoken a word about it. But I mean, you're listening to two people who, I guess, found the light at the end of the tunnel one way or the other. So The reality also is that there's going to be some really ugly, dark times, but the big fuck you is still coming. So don't worry and just keep fighting through it, and you'll get to show them your middle finger too. It's a tough cookie, and I know we've texted each other, and you really sometimes need somebody else to just validate that, you know, you're not crazy, but there's going to be moments where you absolutely feel like you are going crazy. It's a journey, the internal and the external. So I'm really glad that we actually got to have Madison on the show, but also to have the civilian perspective. You know, like, the show does have a lot of MilFam people on here, and we've had a lot of survivors that were in the military. But we can't forget our civilian counterparts, and that this happens everywhere to every gender. So I'm really, really glad that we got your perspective from that aspect, and even more glad that we got you on the show to talk about this fucking dope ass product, so that hopefully everybody starts tagging fucking Sergeant Major Grinston and all them other folks who are running the military nowadays, so that maybe they'll get some purchasing going. So huge thank you to you for coming on, and everybody check out Leda Health, and follow Madison Campbell, especially on LinkedIn, if you want to see the JCPenney photo shoot, which is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. So unless there's any pressing questions, Madison, if you want to have any couple last words.
You know, I just want to bring it out there that, you know, for any survivors listening, we believe you and we're here for you. And we actually offer free support groups for survivors, you know, both folks that are civilian and non-civilian. And so those can be found at leda.co/healing circles. And just want to know that there are people out there, you know, really trying to make these resources happen, and we're here for you. Yep. Awesome. And that's it. Woo!
Yeah, so check out Leda Health. You guys are on all the social channels, and obviously I think most of the party happens behind the scenes, because nowadays most of us, we don't do that shit in public, so we can keep the trolls out of it. So reach out to Leda Health or any of us on the socials, or of course the Liberty Risk team, who know everybody that is anybody. And with that, I guess we'll bid you all a good fucking night, and cheers.
Bye guys, good night.